Hi, I'm Carl and welcome to my channel where I review flights and talk about destinations. When talking about where my trip to Spain would take me, each time I mention Melilla, I was asked why, and it's a fair question as it's hardly on the Visit Spain tourist route. So in today's review, I'm flying from Seville to Melilla, trying a new airline, but also trying an off-the-tourist track destination. Let's go, travelling with Carl. I spent a few days exploring Seville, and after a couple of Ubers cancelled my ride, one finally took me and I made my way to the airport to continue my travels. Diving into the terminal, the Moorish influence that I enjoyed learning about over the last few days continued into the departures hall of the airport. Tall arches break up the long check-in hall. It's a nice connection to the history of the region, or maybe I'm just reading way too much into architecture now. On a practical level, the departures hall is flanked by check-in counters on the back wall of the length of the terminal. Iberia used counters 14 to 20, but unfortunately only one was open when I arrived. Once an issue with one passenger holding up the line was dealt with, the line moved pretty quickly, and I was able to check in, drop my bags, and obtain the last window seat on what was a full flight. I had selected a seat during the booking process that seemed to be irrelevant, as it was white for my booking when I tried to check in online, where I was allocated an aisle seat. A disaster for an av geek like me. Security was located at the far right of the building. Once security was cleared, a short walk through the obligatory duty-free store before arriving at the A gates of the terminal. I was a bit hungry, so made a beeline for the lounge. The generic VIP lounge serves all airlines at Seville. Iberia passengers with loyalty status can access as well as priority pass holders. Within the lounge there are 3 seating areas, 2 of which consist mainly of 3-seater lounges. I find 3-seater lounges an odd choice for an airport lounge which normally have more paired seating. What are your thoughts on ideal lounge seating? The lounge offers beer, wine, soft drinks and some spirits as well as a selection of cold snacks. There are no views onto the tarmac from the lounge. Instead, semi-frosted glass separates you from the terminal concourse. There are bathrooms available in the lounge, but no shower. It's a small but comfortable lounge, but I'd only recommend access if it's not costing you something extra. I saw one guy use his priority pass to access the lounge, then leave again with nothing more than a bottle of water. I'm hoping he's on an unlimited plan, otherwise that was one hell of an expensive bottle of water. Departure was approaching, so I left the lounge to watch incoming aircraft land and look around the terminal. The A end of the terminal seems quite a bit newer than the B gates, while the C gates appear to be the non-existent or under renovation. There are good views of the tarmac and charging stations available in the A gates, while the B gates areas are restricted as they are being used for non-Schengen flights and require passport control. Waiting at the gates were Vueling, Ryanair, Air France and EasyJet aircraft taking passengers across Europe. As an Aussie traveller, it's nice to see a variety of airlines looking out the windows around European airports. Boarding today was by bus from a remote stand. I normally love bus boarding for the tarmac views, but at Seville Airport there wasn't much to see. To speed up the turnaround, we'd be checked in for boarding, then wait in the stairs for a bus to arrive. The bus ride was short and soon we were waiting for permission to board the plane. Once on the tarmac, most passengers headed for the baggage car to drop luggage that wouldn't fit in the smaller overhead lockers on these regional aircraft. Boarding is done from the rear of the cabin, and upon climbing up the few steps, I made my way to my seat, only to find someone else already in it. After explaining using hand gestures that F was the window and D was the aisle, the man moved out of my seat and I got set up for departure. He promptly fell asleep afterwards, instantly locking me in my seat for the rest of the flight. The flight was full, but with all passengers coming off one packed bus, everyone was on board and seated quickly. The door was closed, the engines were started and we were ready for departure. The plane was uncomfortably hot during this process as there was no air conditioning or airflow in the cabin. Once the propellers were spinning, the cool air began coming through the vents and there was a collective sigh of relief from the cabin. We made a long taxi past the terminal and taxied the full length of the runway before lining up and taking off to the west. Interestingly, with the tailwind. I'm not a pilot, but from the flying I have done, you normally take off and land into the wind. I thought it might be a noise mitigation thing, but alas, the flight path took us over the city centre after takeoff and in the opposite direction to the way we were going. If you've got any ideas of why we did a tailwind takeoff, leave it in the comments below. In a surprise to me, in-flight entertainment is offered on the ATR-72-600 aircraft through BYOD streaming portal. I think this is the first regional aircraft I've flown with some sort of IFE available. While no internet is available, there was a wide selection of TV shows, audiobooks, music and even movies available to stream to your device. I thought it was odd that movies were offered given the shorter sectors these regional aircraft fly, but there they were. I spent most of my flight looking out the window, listening to my own music, but it's good to know that there's options available. After takeoff, we made a 180-degree turn over Seville, but unfortunately I was on the side of the plane without a view. The flight was smooth as we tracked across southern Spain towards the Mediterranean at an eventual cruising altitude of only 15,000 feet. I'm flying on the ATR-72-600 operated by Air Nostrum for Iberia on this flight. The ATR series of aircraft board from the rear of the plane, with row 1 in the rear and 17 at the front. While I guess this makes sense as row 1 is the first you see when you board, it also feels a bit strange having row 1 at the back of the plane. Anyway, the seats are in a 2-2 layout and each seat has a small amount of recline available, an interesting feature for a regional prop plane. I was seated slightly behind the wing. The engine noise, while noticeable, wasn't overly loud. I'd originally selected an extra row C and would have been in the front, but was happy enough to have a window seat. Overall, it's a pretty comfortable cabin, despite being overly warm for most of the flight. We crossed the Spanish coastline south of Melilla and then proceeded in a pretty much straight line towards Melilla. Shortly after the seatbelt sign was turned off, the crew walked the trolley through the cabin offering buy on board service. No one took them up on their offering. I think that's probably because there's no in-sight menus, so it was difficult to see what it was they were selling, with just one menu being waved around as they strolled down the aisle. I later found the menu also available through the in-flight entertainment web portal, but given the short flight and ample snack in the lounge, I opted against perch on this flight. The flight was short, and before long the seatbelt sign was back on again and pre-landing check was conducted. We crossed the coastline over Morocco before flying low over the tall border fence that separates Spain from Morocco. The traditional style of homes on the Moroccan side of the fence further differentiated this little Spanish enclave from its bigger neighbour. A gust of wind just before landing provided an entertaining bump before we touched down and applied the brakes. There's no taxiway at Melilla, so we turned around and backtracked on the runway before arriving to the terminal area. Deplaning was a relatively quick process, as I was one of the few people that didn't have carry-on bags loaded into the hold. I leisurely walked across the tarmac and was the first into the small arrivals hall, waiting for my bags to arrive. Inside, there are two small carousels in the baggage hall. While waiting for the bags to arrive, a flight from Madrid landed, interestingly in the opposite direction to which way we landed. My One World Priority luggage tag seemed to work as mine was one of the first bags out, allowing me to snare one of the few taxis waiting outside the small terminal building. The ATR was a comfortable ride, and I felt guilty even thinking of reclining on such a short flight. A complimentary cup of water and a small snack, however, wouldn't have gone astray, given the €80+ one-way fare for what is a rather expensive short hop. Overall, I enjoyed the experience of flying somewhere new, but will probably grow tired of it if it was part of a regular commute. Melilla is small, so 10 minutes later I was checked into my hotel, looking out the window with a view of the fortress that's long protected this Spanish enclave in northern Africa. I hope you've enjoyed this short review of my experience flying to Melilla. If you did, please hit that like button, and to keep up my travels and flight reviews, give that subscribe button a click too. Thanks for travelling with Carl, and I hope to see you soon.